In this video, we're going to be looking at the leader of Ethiopia, Menelik II, and how his abilities are tied to actual history. So first, let's look at the history of Menelik himself. Menelik II, born Saleh Miriam, was born August 17th of 1844, and his father was actually Prince Haile Melekat. When Menelik was young, Emperor Tewodros II invaded the region that his father controlled and actually murdered his father. Now, typically of the time, you would expect that the new emperor to kill any potential successors to the throne, to the previous throne, but this is not what the emperor actually did. Instead, the emperor brought Menelik into his court, where Menelik grew up and garnered the same desire as the emperor, to ultimately unite all of Ethiopia. And even though Menelik was treated fairly well by the emperor, Menelik still resented being essentially held captive by him. And when he was 21, he fled the court of the emperor. And Menelik came back to become governor of the Shewa region of Ethiopia, actually after leaving the court, and then essentially just bided his time until Emperor Tewodros died and he could consolidate power to become the emperor. And even after Emperor Tewodros died, Menelik still took extra time to form connections between the Shewa kingdom that he was governor of and nearby kingdoms. And at the same time he was doing this, actually the new emperor, Emperor YOHANNES, was in a battle with the expansionist Europeans to the north. And YOHANNES ultimately ended up dying in battle with the Europeans, and Menelik took the title of emperor. And this is where he formally actually took the title Menelik II, derived from Menelik I, who was supposedly the son of Solomon and Queen of Sheba. Menelik initially negotiated with the expansionist Italians that his predecessor was fighting to prevent them from taking over Ethiopia. However, the treaty that the two signed was misinterpreted by the Italians, so the Italians now claimed that they controlled all of Ethiopia. This caused Menelik to reject the treaty and fight the invading Italians. Menelik's armies were incredibly successful at fighting back the Italians, and this all culminated in the Battle of Adwa. After this battle, which Menelik won, the Treaty of Addis Ababa was signed, establishing Ethiopia's dependence with the Italians. And this was really a significant moment in world history because an African nation had just successfully defended itself against a European power. And this was really actually a motivating factor in history for colonized people around the world to rise up and fight their colonial overlords. So now, with peace, Menelik actually embarked on his ultimate goal for getting a unified Ethiopia. Now, the northwestern and central territories of Ethiopia were brought under his control relatively peacefully by making agreements with the leaders, and this allowed Menelik to concentrate his focus on capturing the lands primarily to the south. Menelik eventually controlled much of what is modern-day Ethiopia and is considered to be the founder of modern-day Ethiopia by many. In addition to his conquests and consolidation of territory, Menelik was incredibly influential in fighting the slave trade, enacting a punishment of amputation for any slavers that were caught. Additionally, he helped modernize Ethiopia by creating a national currency, creating a railway system, and developing a postal system as well as a telegraph system. Menelik also created the cabinet of ministers to help enact these measures. And this is actually where his leader ability in civilization gets its namesake. Unfortunately, he ultimately suffered a stroke in 1909, and that really lessened his ability to rule, and he eventually died shortly thereafter in 1913, but he is widely regarded as one of the best rulers of Ethiopia, leaving behind a unified, relatively stable, and relatively modernized country. So that's the essence of the leader of Ethiopia, Menelik II. But what can we understand better about Menelik and Ethiopia's history by looking at his abilities in Civilization 6? Well, we've already mentioned his leader ability of the Council of Ministers. The Council of Ministers in Civilization provides cities founded on hills with science and culture equal to 15% of their faith output and grants all units extra combat strengths when fighting on hills. The faith aspect of this ability likely comes from Menelik's religion of Ethiopian Orthodox, which is a version of Christianity. However, it isn't clear that he was an overly religious leader, so it's not clear to me why Phaeraxis decided he would be a primarily faith-based civ, but I suspect that him being Christian might have helped protect him from some religious wars from the Europeans. The regard to cities being actually built on hills and their prevalence for that likely refers to the mountains of Ethiopia and Menelik's founding of the capital of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. Now, the Ethiopian civilization itself, their ability is the Aksumite legacy, which gives extra faith from improved resources and trade routes. This comes from the Kingdom of Aksum, which was the predecessor to Ethiopia that Menelik had actually controlled, and it had its capital in northern Ethiopia. The Kingdom of Aksum was well known for the development of trade in the region, partially enabled by them minting their own currency, and this is likely why this trait gains bonuses for trade routes and strategic resources in Civ. The fact that Ethiopia is also able to purchase archaeological museums with faith likely comes from the Kingdom of Aksum's development of culture, but I would say this is a little bit unclear from the history. Then there's Ethiopia's special building, which is the rock-hewn church. These are a tile improvement that gives additional faith for every adjacent mountain or hill tile. In real life, this improvement likely refers to the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela in western Ethiopia. These were built in the late 12th century and early 13th century by King Gebre Meskel Lalibel, who commissioned them in an attempt to recreate the holy city of Jerusalem within his own kingdom. And these actually remain an important feature in Ethiopian Orthodox Christian Church now and are considered an important point of pilgrimage for the worshippers, much like Mecca is for many Islamic worshippers. So finally we come to Ethiopia's special unit, the Oromo Calvary. The Oromo Cavalry ignore enemy zone of control, have no movement penalty in hills, and have better sight than the coursers that they replace. The Oromo Cavalry is relatively disconnected from Menelik himself, but instead refer to a time before his reign where there was a great migration of the Oromo peoples from southern Ethiopia to northern Ethiopia. And the Oromo people actually began utilizing their horses as they moved north in the 1500s, giving them a significant increase in the fighting power against the neighbors that they were migrating into, essentially. And this is where they get their bonuses for no movement penalties on hill, better sight, and ignoring zone of control. At some level, it is just a balancing thing. But nevertheless, that really summarizes some of the history connected to Menelik II and Ethiopia itself within Civilization 6. And if you're interested in learning more, I've left my sources in the description. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like on the video, hit that subscribe button, and let me know down in the comments what civilization you would like me to look into next.